We're just going to let a few more people in. So let's see. You've got Russ here. Patrick James, it's great to see you. And let's see here. I know we have a few more others coming. Um, and Megan, it's great to see you. You're looking slim and trim. My goodness, what's going on there? I can see it.
Thank you. Just lots of walking. I walk
Oh,
a lot.
my favorite exercise, absolutely. And well, you guys, it looks like it's three after. I am so excited about what we're going to be talking about today. And so excited to introduce to you guys Patrick Showers, who has recently joined us. He's out of South Dakota. And I couldn't wait for today for many reasons. A, it's about mindset, and I'm always excited to talk about mindset. B, I don't know if you guys know, but Patrick Showers is an absolute seasoned real estate leader, a coach, a very successful former team leader and trainer, and he definitely has this track record of proving how or just helping agents to grow their business. In fact, and Patrick, if you don't mind, I'm going to share this quick story. I love this about you. He was growing a market center with KW, and Gary Keller actually called him because he saw his numbers. He saw the production of the newer agents. He saw the increased production of the producing agents. Literally called him and said, dude, well, maybe he didn't say dude, but he's like, I talk like that. He probably doesn't. But he said, what are you doing? Because you're doing it better than anybody in the country. So you guys, he is worth hearing and listening and putting all the distractions away, getting your pen and your paper out and taking some notes. We are so privileged to have you, Patrick. Welcome to our organization. Welcome to EXP. And I'm excited to hear what you have to share about how mindset matters, the fear of losing versus the joy of gain. So take it over, my friend. It's all yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Jackie, for the kind words and such a great introduction. I'll have to say, like I've been here for right at a month, I think. And, one of the things that attracted me to EXP was the people. And it started with Russell and Amir. And then it was Jackie. And then all of a sudden I meet Don and Gene and Brent and Tom Daves, all of those people I had met when I was in Cabo at One Big Fire. And I'm like, these are people I want to be around. And being here for a month couldn't have went any better. The support that I've gotten. So thank you guys all for that. And I guess the opportunity to share a little bit today about some things I'm passionate about. So thank you guys. So I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of a background on me so you understand who I am. Um, Most recently, I left a Keller Williams Market Center in Sioux Falls. I actually started that organization May 1st of 2012. And when we opened, there were 4 real estate agents in the company, and they belonged to the team of my broker. And when we opened, we're like, we need to grow and we need to grow quick. We opened a little unconventionally because normally they make you have 35 or 40 agents to launch a KW, but we didn't feel it would work in our small market. So I started that. Um, I ended up growing that company before I left in May of last year. I actually left on my 12-year anniversary as the team leader and part owner. I sold out and I became an agent there. But within those 12 years, I left and I had the company at 310 agents. There are less than probably 900 agents in our MLS. That gives you an idea of how big our market is. And throughout that, I recruited over 1,000 agents personally into the company during those 12 years. And I had a lot of fun, and I'll say, it was a great opportunity and experience for me. It's just something that I think, outgrew in that role. The last 4 years when I was at KW, I was also the productivity coach for the entire market center. And, to kind of piggyback on what Jackie said, it was Gary Keller sitting in an airport running reports, and he looked at it, and we were at 76% of all of our agents had wrote a contract in the previous month. And he started looking at historical data, and he's like, they're always over 70%. And he called and said, what are you doing? Because he said, if you can hit 35 to 40%, you're knocking the ball out of the park. He's like, there's something going on with what you're doing. And there was a lot of reasons. I had great staff around me, and I had a very good tenure there. It was good people that I was surrounded with, and we worked together to do that. And in turn, it turned our market center into a powerhouse. We were consistently the top producing market center in the region, even though we were one of the smaller, footprints. We were consistently in the top 50 of all of KW in United States. Yeah, we had a lot of fun growing that. So to basically say, what I love the most about my time there is it gave me joy to coach and help people. That's where I think it started. I have a real passion to do that, and when I'm also doing it, it gives me very good energy. And I often joke that I'm selfish by coaching people, because the way that I guess it makes me feel internally, but also on the flip side, I know that the agents are getting something back. But I always joke with them. I said, this is more about me than you. And they kind of laugh. So prior to KW, and I'll circle all of this around, it's not all about my past, but prior to KW, I was in the financial services industry. And I did mortgages, and many of you or some of you may have heard of Household and Beneficial Finance. It was an old school company, been around for 125 years. It was kind of higher interest rate loans for higher risk customers. And their platform was really to, do loans for 4,000 or 5,000. And then my job was to convert those into consolidation loans on their mortgage. And I started there in Sioux Falls. And then my wife, Shanna, who also joined EXP with me. She got relocated out to Colorado Springs to wish she was with the airline. So I'm like, I can move. So I moved out there and, started working in a market center in Colorado Springs. And then I transferred to another market center, and they were going to make me a manager. And I was in this market center thinking I'm moving to Denver, and they invited me up there for a big meeting with all the managers. And I'm thinking they're going to give me my transfer papers, and I'm moving to Denver, and we were all excited. And they said, hey, Patrick, you're going to become the manager of the Colorado Springs office that you're in. And I went, oh no. Like, I've been working alongside of all these people, and they were my peers. And now I've got to go back there tomorrow and say, hey, I'm your new boss. Well, they knew all my dirty tricks and what I didn't like to do. And they're going to be like, you're just saying that because you're the manager now. So I had to think quickly. And when I came back the next day and said, hey, I'm going to be the new manager here, the old managers moved away. I just sat down and had an open conversation. And I said, what's important, and the way they were paid there was a $24,000 salary. Now, this is 25 years ago. And if they did enough loans and the group did enough loans, they could get bonuses. And I would say most of the people were making $35,000 to $40,000 a year with their bonus. And I don't know where this came from, to be honest. I sat there and I said, okay, I've got a deal for you all. I said, I'm going to give you all a raise today. And I said, what would you be comfortable making and feel really good about? And they came up with the number. If they could make $60,000 a year, they would all be so excited and happy. And there were like 7 loan officers that were there working there. And I said, okay, here's the deal. You have to follow my rules, but how it goes is like this. The first hour of every day is 9 to 10 o'clock, and we're going to call that power hour. So when you come in daily from 9 to 10, all you have to do is make calls for new business. This isn't making appointments. This isn't loan closings. This isn't following up on structuring a deal with your client. It's not presenting. It is 100% lead generation for new clients, where they would basically call people that had small loans and try to take applications to present a mortgage. And I said, could you guys do that? And they said, well, yeah, we could definitely do that. I said, the only other rule is we have 2 more hours a day that are going to be completely sacred as well. And that's going to be the last 2 hours of the day. And some days we closed at 5, so it was from 3 to 5. And some days was 7. I think one day a week was till 7. So that night would be 5 to 7. We're going to call that green time because that's where we're going to make our money. And the same rules apply. You don't set appointments during that time. You don't call and structure deals. It is just lead generating for new customers. And I said, could you do that if you were going to get paid 60,000? And they all agreed and said, yes, we could do that easily if we made 60,000. I said, okay, so it's yours to lose. I said, because the rules go like this. At the end of the year, if you do that for me, if you call for that 1 hour in the morning and the 2 hours at the end of every day, and you follow that to a T, whatever you're short on 60,000, I'm going to personally write a check to you for the difference. So if you only made 40, I'll write you a check for 20 grand as long as you followed those rules. And I said, and to be quite honest, between those hours, I don't care if you go play golf or if you go play racquetball or you go to the gym or pickleball. It wasn't pickleball then, but you can do whatever you want. I just need those 3 hours from you. And they're like, perfect. I go, but the first time that I walk by your desk and I see you structuring a deal or maybe on the internet or intranet back then, looking something up, I said, all bets off. I said, this is my money. I said, I need to make sure that I'm protected because I will do this. And they said, that's a deal. What I learned by that was they were very afraid of losing something. They're like, I get 60,000 or 5 grand a month that is given to me. And all I have to do is make calls for these hours. And their brain shifted. And now they were afraid of losing something. Instead of, if I lead generate, I might have an ability to gain because their minds sometimes don't work that way. We start thinking about the negative, right? We think about, well, what if I make all these calls and I'm doing it for nothing and I don't get anywhere? And yesterday I made these calls and nobody wanted to take an application and I didn't get anywhere. So they start giving up. People start giving up. Well, now I gave them something that they could lose. I no longer, as a manager, ever had to ask people to lead generate. It was understood. I never had to go around and say, hey, how come you're not on the phone? Because it was understood that they were going to get a check at the end of the year if what they didn't hit at least $60,000. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew I needed them to be able to lead generate. So we go through this and our production absolutely explodes. So anybody want to take a guess at what the least amount of money was that any one of those loan officers made that first year?
Oh,
What'd you say?
60,000.
60,000, the least amount? Well, the least amount, yeah.
100
The
grand.
low 100 grand, okay. $117,000 was the least amount that any of those loan officers made that year. And to tell you what that did is it put us on the map. Before taking over that market or that market center, there were 3 other offices in Colorado Springs. We were just average. People were making 35,000, 40,000. There were a lot of market centers losing money. And all of a sudden, we are a rock star in the same market because of lead generation. They did a president's council and they would take the top 20 loan officers in basically half of the United States. So there was probably 2,000 or 3,000 loan officers that were in this group. And every single quarter they would do a trip and it was free. And it would be like, San Antonio or Vegas or, Disney or, wherever, Catalina Island we went on. Every single quarter when I was the manager there, every single one, 7 out of the 20 of my loan officers were part of the top 20. Also, every single quarter, I was ranked the #1 manager in the whole half of the United States. That meant that I got to bring my front desk person. The top 2 managers got to bring their front desk. They would have to close or not close our office. Other offices would come and have to staff it while we went on these trips. Now, I'm not trying to say this to say, hey, I'm better or just, look at how good I was. What I'm trying to get across is the power of lead generation. And if you do it with the right mindset, the sky's the limit. And, the next year we never had to have a conversation about, hey, I'm going to guarantee you 60,000. They made it such a routine because they knew they had something to lose. They came into the office every morning at 9 o'clock, and it was just like when you get out of bed, you've got a routine. You brush your teeth, you take a shower, you maybe get your cup of coffee. That routine became, just a staple in their everyday environment. Same thing happened when I was at Household. The guy from Pomona, California, he calls me and he said, they actually flew in and said, what are you doing here? And I kind of filled them in that we have a lot of fun here. I don't micromanage them. I just let them make their own choices. They're like, we've never seen anything like this. And what it really did is it just showed me how people think. People have a hard time thinking, if I lead generate, what's going to happen is I could possibly get this, because they're thinking of the word possible. When I made it a guarantee, it was something that they didn't want to lose. And it's just a mind shift. And it's such a simple mind shift. So how do you get your mind to shift when it comes to real estate? Because this is exactly real estate. Can you imagine if you really did what I just said, 3 hours a day, like clockwork? You're calling your database, you're calling, if you don't have someone to call, you're hanging out in a coffee shop and you're meeting people, and you worked as hard as you could for 3 hours a day, every single day. Can you imagine what you'd make in today's real estate market? It would be it would be amazing, because there's very, very, very few people that do the lead generation, because we get caught and pulled into this direction and that direction. And, it confuses us on where we need to put our energy. It's like, oh, I've got a closing. When I was at Keller, I taught people, never set a closing for the first 2 or 3 hours a day. That is your green time. You need to lead generate. That's what you do. Why would you set an inspection at that time? Why would you set a closing at that time? Own those hours, and those hours will reward you tremendously. I also like to talk to people about, imagine having a drone that sits over your head. And Amir, I don't know if he's in Barcelona, so he's probably not on here, but he's always got his drone, right? If that drone flew above your head every day and watched you just silently, you didn't have to listen to the buzzing, but it silently watched you. And the person on the other end watching the camera was maybe a spouse or a loved one, or maybe one of your kids, and they watched what you were doing, would they be proud of you? Because I think a lot of times we go to work and we can hide, and maybe our spouses or our kids or our loved ones, they think we're working really, really hard, but are we doing everything in our life to really give them a better life? So I ask people a lot, like, what is the drone telling people about you? Because they can't really see you, but if they could, would you be proud of your actions? And to shift it to where you want people to be proud, you want people to see what you're doing and to be really, really proud of you. And if you did those right things every single day, I can tell you, you're going to get what you want in real estate. And whether that is working on growing a downline, working on building a coaching platform, working on becoming the best listing agent out there where you're listing tons of houses or finding tons of buyers, today's market, I love my buyers. But are we doing everything? So what happens if someone gave you an ultimatum? They said, Jackie, here's the deal. You need to find at least one client today, one client, and I'm going to give you 24 hours to do it. And if you didn't do it, you lose something in your life that's very, very, very important. What that is, I don't know. Think of something very important in your life and get your mind to shift and say, I have got to find a client. If I don't, I lose this. Would you work differently than you did yesterday? 100%, because now we have something to lose. And it's people work differently with that mindset, because I don't know, it's just the way people think a lot of times. And I've always worked with that thing. It's like, I have things to lose every day. I have the respect of my wife, my kids, you know, my business, and my clients. the people that are trusting in me every day when I go to work. I mean, that should be enough. Like that, if I'm not doing what I need to do to provide for them, that's enough to really give me energy and motivation to really go out and make the best of the day that I've had. So I'm going to open it up for any questions or comments, because it just really was a story on mind shift and on shifting your mind to think a little bit differently about some of the things in our life that we do that we don't necessarily think is a lot of fun. So,
Well, before we do that, I know Don's got a question. We'll go right to his. I, this has really challenged me, honestly, Patrick, because you typically, you don't want to sit in the negative and give negative energy to that. And yet I can definitely see the advantage, just asking that question, me losing time with my grandkids could absolutely motivate me to do the right things. And I'd like to just piggyback, as those financial agents, contemplated that and they put those right actions in step, then those correct actions then became habits, really good habits that you didn't have to motivate later on again. And wow, what a powerful story. And Don, let's kick it off with you. What question do you have?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, I love Patrick's approach of giving them something to lose, right? That fear of, like Russell said, it's 7 times greater than the opportunity for gain. And Tom and I have occasionally done things like this where, we didn't always have someone as generous as Patrick that would cut us a check. So what we would do, we'll have a contest, and let's say that you have to show up on Zoom and you have to do a certain activity, like Patrick was saying. Well, why not call your sphere every day? So let's say you make an agreement with an agent in our organization that's in a reload market to yours, and you guys got to meet at 9 o'clock every day, and you got to make 5 calls to your sphere coming from a place of contribution. And the first day that you don't do that, you have to Venmo your partner 500. You have to Venmo your partner $100. And and you don't want to lose that $100, right? And so, and it's kind of, I mean, there's some studies on, needing people to show up at the gym. You're so much more likely to go to the gym if you have a partner that's going to be there. So, if you don't have someone like Patrick in your life that will cut you a check up to 60K, then go get yourself a partner, a peer partner. Actually, if it's not an agent in a reload market to yours, it could be your loan officer. You and your loan officer just meet at 9 o'clock. You both call your database, call from a place of contribution. And right now, you guys, people are not moving out of convenience. But one of the things, if you don't know what to say after you call as a real estate resource, is just say, is there anybody in your world, maybe at your work, that's having a life event? Getting married, getting divorced, having a baby, so forth. And so you activate their reticular activator, because right now people are only moving every 10 to 15 years. Okay. But they have 150 people that they know, like, and trust in their world. And so if people are moving every 10 to 15 years, that means that they've got at least 10 people in their world that are moving this year. More than likely, they're going to be moving because of a life event. So if you follow Patrick's system, get yourself a partner, make an agreed upon time that you're going to call, have a consequence to that, like $100 Venmo to your partner, call your sphere. It could just be 5 dials. Leave a voicemail if you have to. And, Patrick, if somebody calls 5 people a day in their sphere like that, coming from a place of contribution, asking about if there's someone in their world that's having a life event, what kind of transactions is that going to add? Would you say?
oh, I was reading a comment over here. I was trying to respond. What was the last part? I was listening.
Well, if somebody called every day, 5 days a week, to their sphere of influence, coming from a place of contribution, and then asked them if they knew someone in their world that was having a life event, how many transactions do you think that would add in a year?
I believe if you did that and you did it every day, 5 days a week, we'll give you a couple days off, maybe do some open houses or whatever. But I really believe you would struggle to sell less than 40 houses a year if you did that. Really did that.
Yeah, I mean, that which would be incredible. It would make them an icon, right? But if they got
Yep,
half that, they would make a 250,000 a year in most
exactly.
markets, right? So 20,000. So think about that. 20 days in the month, if you're doing 5 a week, you're making 20,000. So if you're making 100 calls, hey guys, if you get half of what Patrick thinks possible, that makes each dial worth $200.
Yep. It's crazy when you break down the math on this.
Yeah.
It's really crazy. And it's just for some reason it's really hard. Because lead generation sometimes, it it's not fun because you may talk to someone and you feel like you're bothering them, but I think you use the key word. You're calling your clients and coming from contribution. How can I help you? And you're having a nice conversation with somebody and they may really need help and they don't really know how to ask. It may be as easy as they need help with something that happened at their house and you've got a good connection for them that you can send over and save them money because their air conditioning unit just went out. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you called. Come from a place of contribution and not a point of, hey, what can you do for me today when I'm calling you? It's all the contribution part because I believe it's 10 times back at you that it's going to come. And I think that's key. And know your database. Before I call people, I call them and I look at all of everything going on in their social media. Think about it. What do people post on social media? They post things they're proud of, right? Look at me. I just went on this great vacation. Hey, look at this. I just ate at this great restaurant. Hey, we're out on the boat with my family and friends. Hey, we're at the ocean. And they're posting the things that they want people to see in them. And they post it and people are, let's just face it, they're addicted to the comments. They're addicted to, oh, that person liked it. This person made a comment to me and it makes them feel good. So sometimes the way I find the people I'm going to call is I just scroll social media and I find somebody that's proud about something. I like it. I make a comment and I make a note. I'm going to call Don tomorrow because Don was just on vacation and they were proud of it. So I called Don and I say, hey, Don, it's been a while since I caught up. I seen you on social media. And he's going to be like, yeah, I seen, he commented. I seen you on social media yesterday. You were on vacation. How was the resort you stayed at? And I just go into a conversation with them and they're so easy to call. And I will tell you, when you do it that way, lead generation is fun because you're just talking to your friends about things that they're proud of and they like, right? It's usually a lot of positive in there. So you can change it and make lead generation fun when you're calling your sphere. Just know what's going on in their life.
Yeah, I was having a conversation. It's been a while with Patrick James, and he actually asked an agent a stunning question, which kind of really it's a jolting question of what's missing. And everyone on this call, like what's missing in your life? And what right activities could be put in place because of that? And why not lean into this to create, even in this crazy market, it's sanity out there. But like what correct activities could you implement out of this fear of loss? And that was such a great question, Patrick. I still am pondering that. Like what's missing in my life? And what if I implemented this fear of loss at a more powerful level? So thank you. Any other questions or comments? We've got a few comments here. Russell, how about the fear of not paying your mortgage if you don't lead generate? Whew, ouch, ouch.
I'll just chime in. I really started thinking about this, and literally all of the stress and the worry and the misery and the things that keep us awake at night in life, it comes from the fear of loss. So, this is a great point. Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very similar to pleasure versus pain for anybody that is, had that presented to them, in the past, where, Russell, you're saying, how about the fear of not paying your mortgage and losing your mortgage, right? So what fear is worse? Is it the fear of picking up the phone and calling a friend and talking to them about their vacation and seeing what's going on in their life and possibly, what's if they need real estate help, or is it the mortgage company's calling? You choose it. It's because it gets worse when you don't do the activities.
Mm, very great point. Yeah, very great point. Any other comments or thoughts, you guys?
I have one.
Go ahead.
Um, I would say something to keep in mind right now too is that so many agents are leaving the business right now. And so keep in touch with those like maybe tier two people that you're like, oh, her sister's an agent or her cousin's an agent, or I know that she wouldn't call me because I know her best friend is. Keep in touch with those people because you don't ever know that tomorrow that person isn't leaving, that agent isn't dropping out, because so many are right now. It's constant.
I think that is a great point. Um, I used to, when I was at the finance company, it was the same thing. We'd have a book of like 5,000 people that we would call and try to convert their things. Well, there'd be certain people in that book we'd be calling, and it's like, they're never going to do anything. They're not going to do anything, whatever. And then all of a sudden, a new person would come on board, and they were a loan officer, and we sat in like a bullpen area. Everybody could hear you, and it'd be like the agent or the loan officer would call and say, yes, is Sarah Smith there? And then all of the other loan officers would be like, oh my God, they're calling Sarah Smith. That's so funny. And the next thing you know, Sarah Smith's in there doing a refinance with them, because things change for everybody. And I think what happens to salespeople is we start in our minds, like you're talking about, deciding who we can and can't help. And it changes so rapidly. You may call somebody today and they have no interest in selling. And tonight they lose their job, and all of a sudden they need you, right? And if you're that person that stays in touch with them, obviously, you know, they're going to think of you.
Yeah, to Noel's point about this leaving the business, you guys, I just helped somebody acquire a book of business for a gentleman that left the Portland market and moved to Houston. But one of the things that you could do, I had a call with Johnny Jennings this morning, and I said, hey, Johnny, you should have your title rep out there with their reticular activator up for people that have relocated out of the market, right? Because tons of people have been leaving California for the last several years, right? Uh, and um, and so 5 minutes after we got off the phone, he did a text intro with his title rep, Heather, and I'm going to talk to her at 11:30 today on behalf of Johnny to just help her to know what to look for. But basically, what I'm going to say to her, I'm not going to ask the title rep for a referral. I'm just going to say, well, Heather, who is the last really good producing agent that you know that has left our market? I mean, they had a database, right? They might have been working it for 10 years and all of a sudden now they're in Houston, Texas, or wherever they went to, right? You could take over an entire book of business, pay 25% referral.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. And if there's no other comments, I'm excited. I would just challenge everybody. What could you do right? This moment to put this actual mindset in place. I'm kind of reminded that famous burn the boats where that conqueror came over. I believe it was to Mexico, and he had all these soldiers with him, and they were going to conquer this land and then go back to Spain, I believe. And the commitment of those sailors was so low because they knew they had a way home. And then he burned the boats. They got on this land and he burned the boats, and their only way home was to conquer this community and then use their boats to get home. And all of a sudden, their commitment was elevated through the roof because their only way home was to get that. And I'm reminded of that, burn the boats. I love that story so much. Thanks guys for all of your work. Tom, who do we have on for next week?
Okay, well, next week, Russ Enyart has a special, amazing guest, and they're going to share how everyone can really take advantage and get more listings in this market right now. Because if you don't list, you don't last. So thank you so much, Patrick, Jackie. Y'all got your inspiration. Time to put in the perspiration. Let's go.
Rock,
Don't lose out.
I love it.
Thanks,
Have a good day.
guys.
Good week. Thanks so much, Patrick.
Yep. Have a good day.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks.